Well, hello. Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to be here with Dr. Nina Mazar. I'm going to introduce her here in a second, but just as we nice as we get started, please feel free to use chat. And there's a Q&A tab, if you notice, in the conversations off to the right side, where you can actually post your questions. So I'm going to introduce Nina because she's fabulous, and I'm excited to be able to introduce her to you all. She's a behavioral scientist and focuses on topics ranging from ethics to social and environmental impact. She's a professor and researcher at Boston University. She actually also belongs to a team of scientists at the Behavior Change for Good initiative, which is based at Wharton. She helped set up the Behavioral Insights Unit at the World Bank and served as the 2019 president of the Society for Judgment and Decision Making. Her research has been published widely in academic journals and featured in the media, including NPR, BBC, the New York Times, Financial Times, Wired, and the ever popular Harvard Business Review. She's helping us with our decision-making work. And so that's how I came to get to know her. She is a wealth of information and wisdom, quite frankly. And so I'm very excited to be able to hear her talk on the dishonesty of honest people. So with that, Nina, I'll let you take it away, and we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I'm very excited to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm hoping that what I'm going to present to you, you will actually find interesting. Now we just need to figure out how I'm going to share my slides. If somebody can tell me how to do that, that would be really wonderful.
Sure thing. Apologies, Nina. So you have three dots on the bottom of the video here. Oh, I'm sorry, not the three dots. You have the third option, which is an arrow up. So if you could click that. So you have the video, the audio, and then the third one says present to audience. So go ahead and click that, and it should allow you to share your screen. It's the second option. And I have you on mute at the moment. So if you could get out, you could unmute yourself also.
It says here that I'm not allowed to share my screen.
Oh, hang on for me. Well, we don't want that. Hold on.
See, just like real conferences, there's things that just happen on the fly, right? It's always a chance to emotionally regulate.
Okay, can you try it again? The third one.
It's interesting. It doesn't offer me to share my screen.
Okay, please hang on one second for me. To troubleshoot. Thank you, Shannon. I don't know if I wonder if it's your settings. We were able to do it in another presentation. Do you want to send me your slides and I can share them since I have that ability?
Sure, we can try that.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. We'll get it going. No problem.
Yeah, I think Colleen may be right too. I think if we could make her a host, that would work. But
yeah, let's give it a shot, eh?
Yeah. Thanks, Colleen. Who else is here, by the way? I see there's going on 86 people that are joining us right now. Anybody, can you tell us where you're joining from? That's always fun to see.
Okay.
Hi, Louie. Wow, Geneva, Michigan. Nice.
Nina, I went ahead and made you co-host. Thank you, Colleen and Shannon, for the suggestion. Let's see if that works. If not.
Yeah, just a moment.
No problem. Hi from Michigan. I'm from Michigan.
No, I only Yeah, no. That is very strange.
Okay. I'm happy to share them, so hang on. I'll pop these up.
On to plan B.
On to plan B.
I've sent them to your email.
Okay, thank you. Give me 1 second.
Where's Southwest Ranches, Giselle? Oh, Florida. Nice. All right.
Okay, I have them. Thank you. Here we go.
Nigeria, Denver, Connecticut.
I'm just going to get them full screen, and here we go.
All right. Okay. Looks like we're in business. So I'm turn my camera off while you present, Nina, and then I'll come back on to facilitate question and answers. So take it away.
Wonderful.
And Nina, just to be, can you see full screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
So if you could advance to the next, please. Okay, so thanks very much. What I would like you to do is to think about a lie that you have recently told. What was that lie? Who did you tell it to? Why did you tell it? And how did you feel about it? So if you just think about that for a moment, and if you could advance to the next one, Ryan. Most likely what you have been thinking about is something like in the Seinfeld video here that I would like Ryan to play.
All right, hang for me.
It's the Seinfeld one.
Yep.
Nobody's seen me. Isn't he gorgeous? Ew. Isn't he gorgeous? Oh, gorgeous. Yes.
So very gorgeous.
Right now, check the door. Let the bugs in.
Is it me, or was that the ugliest baby you have ever seen?
Oh, I couldn't look. It was like the peekaboo.
Boy, a little too much chlorine in that gene pool. And you know, the thing is, they'll never know. No one's ever going to tell them.
Oh, you have to mind.
Oh, it's a must-lie situation.
Yes, it's a must-lie situation.
You know, I don't think we should...
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go back. So those are the kind of must-lie situations. Ryan, if you could move to the next slide. We don't see right now any. Presentation mode, please.
Oh, sorry. I just want to make, I am in the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go.
Okay. So those are the kind of must-lie situations. So we grow up early on learning that those kind of lies are okay, right? Those are comforting lies, and it's better to tell them than to tell the unpleasant truth. I think many of us can remember when parents tell us or told us in the past as children to not say something that could potentially hurt someone else's feelings. So those are interesting situations, but that's actually not what I would like to talk about today. I would like to talk about something that we are more associating with the types of images on the next slide, where you see, you're thinking of companies like Enron or people like Bernie Madoff and so on. And next slide. So, but like most of the time when we think of these kind of people, we kind of envision like something like those people here in the boardroom where they say, honesty is the best policy. Okay, now what's the second best policy? policy. So this idea is there are a few bad apples out there. They don't have any morals whatsoever. And for them, a decision to be honest or to be dishonest is just a simple considering of the costs and the benefits, right? And so if you're dealing only with these kind of people, these few bad apples, well, then you just have to increase the likelihood of being caught. You want to increase the fines, and that should take care of that, right? But if we go to the next slide, at the end of the day, what is going on is, so next slide, please, Ryan. Dishonesty is prevalent in our daily lives. I'll just give a few examples. Like if you look at fraud in the US property and casualty industry, has been estimated at 10%. The US tax gap, 450 billion. More than 1 trillion worldwide are estimated to be paid in bribes. So if you look at those kind of numbers, that can be hardly committed by those few bad apples that don't have any morals. No, they are committed by people like you and me, who actually think very highly of themselves as being honest individuals, yet we do sometimes transgress. And next slide, please. So, and the next. And let's show the whole. So, and it is actually quite interesting because when you run surveys after surveys with people like you and me, or also with high school students, so for example, the Josephson Institute of Ethics runs these big surveys with several thousand high school students throughout the US. And you always find that almost everybody, it's like 98%, 99% of people or students think of themselves as very good people, trustworthy, honest, people of character. And they say these are very important things to them. So there are these people like you and me, we think of themselves as good human beings. But at the same time, when we look at all those discretions or transgressions in the world, they cannot be committed by just a few bad apples. So it's important to understand how are we making decisions that are sometimes leading us astray, that are leaving us from the path that we care about. And if you go through the next slide, I think that can be quite nicely explained in the next one by what I have here in this cartoon by Calvin and Hobbes. And I know it's a bit small, so let me read it to you. So, today at school, I tried to decide whether to cheat on my test or not. I wondered, is it better to do the right thing and fail, or is it better to do the wrong thing and succeed? On the one hand, undeserved success gives no satisfaction. But on the other hand, well-deserved failure gives no satisfaction either. Of course, most everybody cheats sometime or other. People always bend the rules if they think they can get away with it. Then again, that doesn't justify my cheating, doesn't it? Then I thought, look, cheating on one little test isn't such a big deal. It doesn't hurt anyone. But then I wondered if I was just rationalizing my unwillingness to accept the consequences of not studying. Still, in the real world, people care about success, not principles. Then again, maybe that's why the world is in such a mess. What a dilemma. So what did you decide? Well, in this particular case, Ryan, please, one more time. Nothing. I ran out of time and I had to turn in a blank paper. So that's not what's happening in the real world. If you go to the next slide. So what is rather happening in the real world with people like you and me, we have our moral self-view, we are tempted, and we are such smart individuals, we have developed all kinds of tools or tricks to rationalize our actions. And that helps us to commit a little bit of dishonest acts, and so benefit from them without feeling bad about ourselves. And this is what I would like to talk to you about in the next half an hour. A few things that we've found out from psychology, the tricks that we are using, so that you become more aware of what situations may make it easier for you to transgress, and how you may want to sometimes introduce small, subtle changes in the environment that can help you or your team at work to focus more at the issue at hand and not transgress. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is just another example of rationalization. Wait, those weren't lies. That was just spin. Next slide. So as a researcher, since I'm interested in these questions, I first need to think of a way, well, how can I even measure people's dishonesty, right? In a research environment, in a lab. And here's an example of how we do this. Next slide. So imagine you come to a lab. So imagine you're a participant and I give you a general knowledge test or a matrix test sheet. If you can advance a little more. So, and that basically looks like this. You have like 20 matrices with 12 or 16 numbers. So here in this particular case, 12. And I tell you, find the 2 numbers in every matrix that add up exactly to 10. And for each one that you solve, you will get 50 cents. So you have the incentive here to solve as many as you can, because then you will earn more money. It's also not as hard, right, to find 2 numbers to 10. Next slide. And then after like 5 minutes, next slide, please. So after 5 minutes, when it's done, the following happens. Next, so advance, please. So I give you after 5 minutes a collection slip and I say, okay, now count the number of matrices that you have solved, write it down, hand the test sheet and the collection slip to the experimenter who will pay you. And here you don't have a chance to cheat because the experimenter goes over your matrices and checks how many you've solved and you're paid accordingly. And that serves as a baseline. So I have an idea, how many can people on average solve when there's no cheating involved whatsoever. Next slide. And then I introduce an opportunity to cheat. So for example, I say, well, do the test sheet. After 5 minutes, write down how many you have solved and then go to a shredder and shred your test sheet. I don't care about the test sheet. Take the collection slip to the experimenter who will then pay you accordingly. So clearly here you can cheat and get away with. I cannot prove how many you have solved, just the experimenter is paying you. So I want to see, will people in a situation like this say that they have solved more of the matrices? And you can take it even a step further. Next slide. So we actually even had a condition where we said, once you have written down how many matrices you have solved, advance, shred both the collection slip and the test sheet, advance, and then just walk over to a jar with money, pay yourself, and walk away. So here in theory, you could take you could take just everything out of that jar and run away, right? Next slide. And now that we have this tool to study dishonesty, now we can go ahead and just, if you were wondering, so we ran studies like these at various locations at this point in time in the US as well as outside. And what do we usually find? Next slide. So here's an example of a general knowledge test where 50 questions people could solve. And in the no cheating condition, you see people solved on average 33 questions. And then in the 2 cheating conditions, please advance, you will see that people cheat. Now, this, what I'm showing you here on the left is what a group of people predicted we would find. They thought, well, the easier it is to cheat, people will cheat more. And if you advance, you will see that people do cheat indeed, but not so much. Advance, please. So they only cheat by about 2 to 3 questions. And it doesn't matter if you make it even easier, if you even remove the experimenter and they pay themselves. No, it stays about content. It's way below the max of 50 that they could have cheated on, right? So why is that happening? We think it's because of this idea. It's easy to cheat by just a few questions and then come up with a few rationalizations so that you don't feel bad about yourself. But if you were to cheat too much, it would be really hard to convince yourself that you are a good person. And so this is how we end up cheating a tiny little bit, but not too much. And advance. And the interesting thing is when we look at the distribution of the number of questions people solve, you see that in the no cheating condition, these are the black bars, and then in the red bars are the cheating condition, you see that the whole distribution shifts over by 2 to 3 questions. So it's not that we have a few people that cheated to the maximum amount. No, like everybody cheats by a few questions, but that's it. Okay, advance. So what do we learn from that? Big takeaway. So the good news is that people cheat only by a small amount. Yes, the majority does cheat, but only by a small amount. And the idea is, as long as you cheat only a limited amount, you don't feel bad about yourself. Let's move on. So when you understand this about human psychology, that you only want to cheat by a small amount so that you don't feel bad about yourself, you can think about, well, what facilitates rationalizations and what makes rationalizations harder? Because if you understand that, then you can think of how you can create environments that make it so that people, including you, cheat less. So what would facilitate rationalizations? You may try and think about this yourself. I will show you a list on the next slide, Ryan. So let's play that video. That's one example of a rationalization, which is pretty good.
That is the most dishonest thing I've ever heard. I should box your ears. You sneaky pig.
Is it?
Hey, you easy.
Oh, and now we don't have sound.
Rats channel. Well, sir, they send over this flim flam man to assault. You know what he did? He offered to hook me up illegally to every cable channel for only $50.
Boy, what's this world coming to?
You know, that's exactly what I
Gotta go. Oh, hey, stop, cable man, stop! What do you want? I want free cable. So this is okay, isn't it? I mean, everybody does it, right? What? Oh, hey, if you're having second thoughts, just read this pamphlet. So you've decided to steal cable. Uh-huh. Admit, cable piracy is wrong. Fact, cable companies are big, faceless corporations, which makes it okay.
See, the clown is a treasure that will last a lifetime.
Cable, it's so wonderful that I shared.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So what we will do actually, let's actually continue just with 2 more slides, and then let's do the rest of the talk without slides. So that will make it easier for Ryan, and I think that way we can also then start potentially making it a bit more interactive and have Andrea also be a part of it. So Homer Simpson was using a rationalization. Everybody's doing it, right? But you know what? There are a bunch of websites out there that do similar things. So for example, since I'm a professor, there are websites out there where students can go and they think they can find papers for all kinds of things that they could buy and then resubmit as their own. And it says it's not cheating, it's collaborating. It says here at the top left of that screen. And let's just switch to the next one. You know, you can even buy fake job references. And again, these type of websites give you the impression everybody is doing it. Well, we are in business since 2010. We have assisted over 100 clients towards employment. So those are the kind of things that are supposed to give you the impression everybody is doing it, so it is okay, right? You know, and some things are also inherently easier for us than others to use to rationalize our actions. And I think we can stop the screen actually now and let's just have the 3 of us here. So, you know, back when I was at MIT, we had a fridge that we were sharing, a common fridge. And there was one of us who on a weekly basis had a 6-pack of soda cans in the fridge. And that person complained that towards the end of the week, more of those cans were gone than he had consumed. So somebody was stealing these cans of Coca-Cola. It actually ended. And so we thought, well, let's just play with that person who is doing that. So let's just see what happens when we put the six-pack, but with the plastic, you know, that keeps the six-pack in check, when we put that in the fridge. That made it somehow harder for the person to take away the first one. Once one was removed, things were easier, and we would observe again the cheating. And then one day we thought, well, let's be provocative. And instead of the six-pack, let's actually put in some dollar bills. Because at the end of the day, you are stealing money from somebody, right? Did the dollar bills disappear? No, they did not. Why? I mean, ultimately, the consequence of our action is the same. But if we don't directly see it, it's easier for us, even if we know ultimately what it means, it's easier for us to not think about it. That's another way that makes it easier for us to not engage in dishonest actions. And we did a very similar thing just to show this in a lab setting, where, again, I had that kind of a matrix task that I showed you before. But what I did was I said, well, for each matrix you solve, you will get a chip, like, you know, like the ones that you get when you play in a casino. And we said, and then once you're done, go out to a different experimenter who will exchange it, and each chip is worth 50 cents. Again, same thing as before, but now there was this intermediary, right? And what happened? Cheating went way up. I mean, substantially up, just by introducing the chips. And I think this is a very interesting thing from a societal perspective, because so many of our interactions are indirect, right? Like, just think about how we are so much removed from cash. We are using stock, we are being paid in stock options, we are paying with credit cards. Maybe this is also the reason why employee theft and fraud is so huge, right? Because we are not thinking about the final step, that we are actually really taking money from somebody. So those kind of rationalizations or situations make it easier to rationalize. And then you can also think about the opposite. Well, what can you do to make it harder? And we have done a lot of studies on that. I will just give you a few examples. So imagine you're filling out a tax form or an insurance claim form. Actually, let's do a tax form. And it asks you, did you have any additional income? Right? Now, you can envision one world where it's okay to just leave the cell blank because you didn't have any, right? You can imagine another world where even if you didn't have any, you're required to enter 0. And research suggests that in the second option, people would cheat a little less, because it's easier when you don't have to fill out anything. Because then you can say, well, I didn't see the cell. I somehow, I was working really hard on my taxes. It was late and whatnot. I didn't see this question. But if I'm forced to type 0, I'm doing something actively. And now I have to think about, do I really feel comfortable writing in 0 or not? So these small designs in our environment that really can facilitate or make cheating harder. And we did, again, an example like that in a lab setting, where we, for example, also tested the use of an honor code. So imagine you come to my lab, I give you the matrix test sheet, but at the top of that test sheet, it says, well, before you start, Andrea, please sign that you understand that this short study falls under the, pick a university, UCLA's honor system, for example. We ask you to sign, and notice that the signature is on the test sheet that you are then afterwards shredding. So I have no way to see if you've even signed it. Turns out introducing an honor code, very, very effective. Turns out even effective at universities that don't have an honor code. Students suddenly become much, much better at that. So these kind of introducing these upfront pledges can be really useful. So for example, US White House, SBST, introduced this idea that how do you call them? So companies who are selling to the government, when they have to fill out forms, the government introduced like an online prompt where people were actually, sorry, I'm slowing down. I'm slowing down because I actually want to read to you what the box actually says. So it's about the accuracy of self-reported sales by vendors of goods and services to the federal government. And so before they type anything in, they were asked to say, I promise that the information I'm providing is true and accurate. And just by introducing this upfront prompt, the federal government collected an additional 1.6 million in fees within a single quarter as a result of this very small change in design. And so you can think of other ways, right? I can ask you, well, how important is honesty to your family? Are you a proud citizen of your country? Would you steal from your friends? Or social norms, also very helpful. If you know that many people are actually behaving well, you may want to point that out. So for example, I did recently a big tax experiment with the government of Poland in collaboration also with the World Bank, where for people who were delinquent with their income taxes, we sent a letter where we told them, and these were like the real stats, I don't have them right now in my mind, but something like 90% of people in your local area have paid their taxes on time. You are one of the few, Andrea, who hasn't done so. Works really well. Most of the time, not everywhere, which is also very interesting. So there are differences from country to country. Let me give you just a few more tips to think through, and then I'll open it up for questions. So it's also very different. Like if I say don't cheat versus don't be a cheater. Or if I say your taxes have not been paid on time versus you have not paid your taxes on time. So personalize things, make it about you as a person and not just an act. That makes it harder for you to give into cheating. Or there's also some wonderful research by a friend of mine that has shown setting clear, specific, and personalized rules of conduct are actually really helpful. So for example, if you say you should not accept gifts from mutual fund providers, it's much less subject to motivated reasoning than advisors should not engage in conflicts of interest. Right? Now, of course, it's hard to come up with specific rules for all kinds of for all kinds of bad behaviors, right? But at least for maybe the most important ones. Or there are also studies that show, like if you have a pair of eyes that you, like a picture of a pair of watching eyes that you put on the wall, people feel like somebody is observing them. And so they are just more self-conscious about what they're doing. And that is sometimes all that it takes to make people think more and weigh really like what are they doing. So I think the main takeaway of what I've been saying here for the last half an hour is, first of all, good news. People are mostly good. So that's great. But even good people temporarily become bad people. And our rationalizations or our abilities to rationalize are probably stronger than we think. And there are several factors, especially also in our environment, that can really affect that. So awareness for that is an important first step to make better decisions. And I'm saying better because most of us want to be honest individuals. And so some of these contextual factors, just to bring them up again, are social norms. How directly can I see the consequences of my action? Omission versus commission. So think about that idea with a text form where you have to type in or write in a zero versus not. One thing that I haven't mentioned is also the licensing from other good deeds. So sometimes when we have just done something good, we tend to pat ourselves on the back. Andrea, you've just done such a wonderful thing. You can pick whatever. And so that is a moment when we are particularly prone to then, if a next ability to transgress comes along, to then give in, because we've just proven to ourselves how great of a person we are, and that gives us the license sometimes then to be more willing to give in. Other things that I haven't really mentioned, but if other people are involved and my transgressions can also benefit others, I'm also more likely to give in because, again, I can also use that as a rationalization. I'm doing it for somebody else, not for me. And unfairness. If I feel that something is unfair, I'm also much more willing to give in. And I often in these talks also get the question whether it's just all context or also individual differences. And you can find findings for one or the other. Sometimes there are findings that say, well, males are different than females, and then people want to ask, well, who is the more dishonest gender? And it's actually not that clear. I'm sorry if I'm disappointing you. I'm not giving you an answer that you were looking for. Sometimes some studies claim that people who are more creative tend to give more into temptations because they can be more creative to come up with rationalizations. But then there are also studies that are not that clear on that. But I think what is becoming pretty clear is that self-control ability does matter quite a bit. So if you're a person that is good at overriding system 1, using your system 2, snapping out of the moment, seeing the bigger picture, controlling your impulses, that's certainly a good thing to train. And I will stop here and open it up for questions. And I'm sorry again with the hiccup with the slides.
That's okay. So many questions. I'm curious. The one that came up first, and maybe I can tie it into Louise's question about what is a white lie. That's interesting. But maybe I'll have you answer that first. Like, what's a white lie? I guess what I'm thinking about is the difference between lies that benefit me and maybe the reasons I lie that actually save someone else's feelings or are, along that line. What does research show about that?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on white lies because white lies, as society, we have embraced, we accept them, right? We teach them our children, right? So if my daughter sees a person that's, looks maybe different than what she is used to, she may just say it out loud, and we as society may have decided, no, certain things we do not want to say, right? So white lies are really lies that are acceptable or even more than acceptable. We, in certain situations, we want them, we would prefer them over saying the unpleasant, hurtful truth. So, yeah, so white lies are really inherently social lies, accepted, learned from an early age on. It's to please others. It's considered harmless in our society, or even beneficial in the long term. It's serving the greater good. So yes, it's when the truth is considered to be more harmful or painful, and so that is, I think, how you can think of a white lie, and that some of us may worry about that too. I think from a philosophical standpoint, also fairly interesting, but that has not been the focus of my attention over the last 20 years.
Yeah, got it. That's still, I think, helpful to think about, and not wanting to create pain for someone else might be the reason for a lie, but it's still a lie. I'm also curious around you talked about how there's a reduction in lying or dishonesty when you take some of these measures that you have addressed. What impact does getting caught have as a deterrent?
Oh, so that's what I was trying to bring up when I had this cartoon where the people in the boardroom, right, they were saying, honest best policy. Okay, now what's the second best policy, right? So, I mean, obviously, what's the likelihood of being caught, and what is the fine or the punishment when being caught? Those are important considerations. I'm not saying let's get away with that, but the point is, despite of those which we have in our society, which we use in our society, we still see a lot of day-to-day dishonesty that is, when you sum it up, quite costly to society. And it is because, and that's what we're arguing for, is because just the likelihood of being caught or the severity of the punishment, they don't take, so just these two factors don't take into account that there is also moral consideration that we care about. Yes, if you don't care about morality whatsoever, then it's really just what are the costs of engaging in a dishonest act versus what are the benefits, right? And then if the costs outweigh the benefits, I'm not going to do it that much anymore. But what I'm saying is there are also plenty of situations to think about where many people will give in by a small amount. And if you want to curb that, because in aggregate that can be actually quite large, then you may also consider more about the subtleties that I talked about. And that requires you to understand how human psychology works. But yes, so deterrence in general works very well. And if you care about which one is the more important one, there is some research out there, some nice one actually. One just came out in PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Sciences of the US, that shows really quite nicely that it's primarily the likelihood of being caught that matters. Not so much how much the punishment ends up being.
Yeah, interesting. There's a few questions that are all related about creating a culture of honesty, and one of the questions is more about like, what if there's a culture where lying is not considered bad, and so if you live in that kind of culture, what does that say? And then also, what can we do that actually creates a culture of honesty in our workplaces, in our families, etc.? How do we do that?
Good questions. Yeah. If I had the perfect solutions to this, I think I would be very rich. But I can give you my few cents on this based on the work that I've been doing, as well as plenty of really wonderful researchers out there. So to the first one, yes, if everybody else around you is cheating, you're most likely doing it too, because it's accepted, or you even feel like you are at a disadvantage if you're not doing it, right? Especially when you think of maybe of a corrupt environment where maybe if you pay a bribe, you're more likely to get the contract, you're more likely to get a job, right? And if you are the only one that says, no, I'm not going to do that, well, then you're left behind, right? And there's also research that shows this quite clearly. There's this really nice work that has done research all around the world, actually. So, I mean, not in every country, but in almost every country. And what they found was that the higher the prevalence of rule violations in a country, as measured with all kinds of indices, like several bribe indices that are out there, they found that the higher the prevalence of rule violations in a country, the more people in those countries, when you ran experiments with them on cheating, the more people were likely to cheat. So yes, that is absolutely true. And what I would like to add, so some friends of mine did a study a few years back where they showed that it matters who the group is that is cheating. So yes, it definitely also matters how many others are cheating, but it also matters who those others are, and are you identifying with them or not? So, so these researchers that I alluded to ran a study, something like this. Like, imagine again, you are in my lab and you get the matrix test sheet, and I actually have a person that works for me. I like, let's say, a student that is all in on this experiment. And that student wears a t-shirt from the university that everybody else from that lab is in, okay? And that person clearly after 30 seconds gets up loudly and says, I have sold all 20 matrices. What am I supposed to do now, right? And then they walk over to the experiment and get paid. You're sitting there as a participant like, whoa, clearly they're cheating and they're still being paid. But this person has this t-shirt from your university. You feel some affiliation. What happens? The likelihood of cheating between everybody else in the lab goes up. Now you rerun this experiment and that person has a t-shirt from a competing university that you do not like. What happens? Well, those are these guys. We are not like that. And suddenly you are distancing yourself from that, and you show actually less cheating. So that matters too. So this in-group, out-group, that matters.
Interesting.
So how do you create a culture of honesty? It's an interesting one. It's certainly not an easy one. So what I've basically talked about in the beginning of the session is more about how can you create an environment that is more conducive to one type of action versus another, right? So how can you adjust the environment in which people are dealing with, right? So, you know, if you are an accountant and you have to fill out forms, have prompts at the beginning that make people think about ethics, so that ethical conduct is at the forefront. I mean, is very salient to you, right? Maybe you want to have some eyes up there. Maybe once in a while you want to have an inspirational quote, but it should change every time, because we are also so good at tuning out things. So when something is novel, we are paying more attention. The whole idea is that in the heat of the moment, when you're tempted to be dishonest, to have some kind of input from the environment that makes you get out of your decision-making mode that we are very attuned to with the rationalization, everything. So get out of that and really reconsider everything, right? But if you're, for example, facing the same honor code, I mean, let's just take the example of a student, right? In our example, it worked really well. If you have an honor code every single time, at some point, you're not reading it anymore. You're not really processing it anymore. You're just signing it and you move on. So it's no longer working. I would also assume, like what I showed you with the White House, where they introduced that prompt. If you're doing this on a weekly basis, at some point it's just a nuisance, and you're basically just doing it, and it's gone, right? You're not again thinking about it. So does that maybe mean that we have to change things once in a while so that they are more new, so that people are really engaging with these external factors? From an internal perspective, what can you do? That makes it really harder, because from an individual perspective, we don't have a good sense yet. What are the individual factors that make some people be better than others, other than really that issue of self-control that we know? But at the end of the day, what really matters is having role models that act in the right way, and the people that do act in the right way, even when the temptation is really high to take the shortcut, you want to celebrate them publicly. You want to show how important that is to you, and you also want to celebrate them or point that out, even if that means that it's maybe suboptimal based on other measures. Like if that means that you did not maybe get the contract or whatnot, but showing you as a manager or a leader, showing what you value and living it also is one of the most important things. I mean, that's what research always shows. It's the action that matters.
Got it. It's when you asked at the very outset, like, think of a lie you recently told. I don't know if this is true for everyone else, but I know that at first of all, I was like, I don't lie. Like there's this, the way I think about myself as an honest person to your all of your points. And I wonder if it's more useful to take the titles off, the judgments off of being a liar or an honest person, and maybe ask ourselves, why was I tempted to not tell the truth in this situation? And to what extent, like a lot of what you've pointed to are external things that we can do to create an environment where honesty is the norm more than anything else. But do you have any advice or in how we can even talk to ourselves or our internal environment that might actually support more honesty on our parts?
Oof, that's a very difficult one. I don't know, because what you're saying on the one hand, like not labeling yourself as a liar, to open up the conversation basically with yourself. I can see where this is coming from, but at the same time, if I tell you, don't be a liar, that's more effective than if I tell you, don't lie on,
Uh-huh.
yeah, don't lie, right? Because we want to think of ourselves as good people. And if you do X, you are no longer a good person, if that really compromises who you are, that works really well.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So I'm not sure. And I'm not sure if I'm not aware of any research that could really answer your questions here in one way or another.
Mhm.
But actually, this is not to your point. But what I wanted to bring up, which I just thought of, which I forgot, one of the biggest reasons why people engage in dishonest acts, especially also in a work environment, is actually loyalty. They do things
Mm.
out of loyalty. So I think that's also something very important to be aware of, because we want to help somebody.
Yeah, it's noble, right?
And,
That I'm going to do the right thing by doing a wrong thing.
and so taking oneself out of that situation and taking the perspective of, if this had been somebody that I don't know well, or that I don't care much about, where I don't have a personal relationship, if it's not a person that has done a lot to me, how would I then act?
Mhm.
And if your feeling tells you I would act differently, then that is that is a sign that loyalty is getting in the way here.
Yeah.
So loyalty is an important one. And another one that I also wanted to say is incentive structures, the way how we design them.
Mhm.
Very important to think about those two, because they are a big. Those are a factor that lead to problematic behavior.
Yeah. And this might get at a question a couple people have asked in different ways around any research or findings you have about adolescence and lying. That, I mean, number one, it came to my mind because I have two teenagers that live in my house, and they honesty seems to shift at this age. And so I'm wondering if there's even just something about the age group, but one of the questions is more about honesty and distrust among parents and others in authority, and if there's how that dynamic plays out or creates an environment of trust or distrust as a result.
Yeah. So there is some research on differences with age. It's again not that clear. That's why I didn't have it on one of my slides when I was talking about individual differences, like also with the gender. Now, there are differences absolutely with young children, and then as you become an adolescent, simply also because as a very, very young child, you don't have a good sense of yourself yet. So you take just the rules without really thinking about, well, if I engage in this act, what does this say about me as a person, right? So young kids just don't have that ability yet. They just differentiate between, well, I was told to do this, or I was told to do that. I'm not allowed to do that, or I'm not allowed to do that. There is some indication that as we get older, we engage in less of that. We're also becoming more trusting. But again, I don't think it's that solid. But I'm also not an expert on that, so I don't fully know. But yeah.
Got it. Yeah, well, we can just leave it there because, like I said, some adolescents seem to have a shifting relationship with the truth, but it all goes.
Well, that may be part of also exploring, right?
Yeah, I think so.
How far can I go? How bad are really the consequences?
Right. Yeah. So you've listed. I've been kind of tracking what you've said are some of the reasons that we might lie. Incentives are set up that way. It's an in-group, out-group thing. We might do it to help others. Loyalty can be a factor. Unfairness or entitlement might be other reasons that one I found really interesting. Well, now that you're giving me a chance to do something, I feel entitled to ask or get more than maybe what I've been offered.
Yeah.
And you also talked about steps that we may be able to take to create more honesty in our environments, like being self-aware. what could we ask ourselves, or what could we pay attention to that would actually help us build that kind of awareness?
Well, how do we reflection and having the time for that reflection, right? Like, I think two things are important. So first of all, being aware of what are the factors that are creating these circumstances where it may be easier for me to transgress versus not, right? So having that knowledge is the first step. But if you don't have the awareness, even if somewhere in the back of your mind, you know it, in the moment, you will just not think about it, right? So creating that awareness in the moment where you're tempted, how do you do that? And that's why I was saying, from an environment perspective, context perspective, you can think of interventions, right? Like new pop-ups or whatnot that force me to do so. From an individual perspective, like if you think of, okay, what can I personally do? Mm-hmm. That I think is really, you have to expose yourself to situations where you can train this, where you can train self-control.
And I think maybe part of that is what you also said about novelty, that we keep things fresh for ourselves, so it's just we don't kind of work on autopilot. Might also be a key to become more aware. And maybe it's for those of us who are emotional intelligence practitioners and fans, part of that awareness would be emotional awareness around what's tugging on me right now, or what am I tempted to lie based on how I feel, or am I creating an environment where that could be true for others? That emotion regulation, I think, plays in here. I've talked a little bit about that before. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I mean, many or much of the research on dishonesty traditionally came out of this idea of that the emotions matter so much, and that you can also detect it based on facial expressions whether somebody is cheating, right? Because so much is underlying emotion there. So understanding that part is should be useful too. That's right.
Yeah, well, especially because you said like if I can cheat and not feel bad about it, then I'm more likely to do that, as long as I continue to feel good about myself. And there's the whole bunch of emotions around that too. So
feedback loop.
Yeah, nice intersection, I think, between dishonesty, emotions, and the decisions that we make. We're almost at the end of our hour, Nina. What would any advice that you haven't already provided that you'd want to leave us with, or maybe a specific action item that would be useful for us to take with us on the road?
I would say, think about the environment in which you're in, and see whether, as a manager within your team, also think about what are the situations that you or your company has created, or in your personal life, that have some of these pitfalls that I talked about. Mm-hmm. And remind yourself of these particular pitfalls, search for them, and if you find them, try to change the environment and see whether that changes the amount of conflicts of interest that you're feeling, or the temptations that you're feeling. So that's one aspect. But I also think, from a personal internal perspective, I would like to challenge you to start with, again, awareness for those pitfalls, but then find time to reflect on your actions and see what could you have done differently, and how could you train self-control, because it's all about the power of your system 2 or your system 1.
Mm-hmm. And I just got to sneak in this last one here, because Annie just asked a really probably a deep question, but maybe we can give a quick answer to it. Which, how does safety factor into our desire to lie or tell the truth? And she found that in a class that she took, that was explained that kids will often lie when they don't feel safe. So is anything that you would offer there as well?
I can't speak to that because we have
Yeah.
never created unsafe environments, and I'm also not aware of that kind of work. So I don't
Yeah.
think I'm qualified to answer the question, but it's an important one. But
Yeah, so interesting. Maybe future research, Annie, will help us figure that out. So I appreciate you asking the question. I appreciate all the questions. And Nina, thanks for getting us to think more deeply about our environments and ourselves and do some navel gazing on why we lie or why we don't lie and what we can do to up honesty with ourselves and those around us. Thank you very much for joining
thank you.
us. And we'll be taking a 15-minute break and come back, and we'll have a nice presentation with Sean Kelly, professor of philosophy at Harvard, in conversation with Matt Kirsch. So Sean is fantastic. He's so interesting to listen to. So I definitely hope you can join us for that. And we'll see you again very soon, Nina. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.